Imagine standing at the edge of the sea 40,000 years ago. No lighthouse, no engine, no compass, no weather forecast. Just a stretch of black water that could hide food, land, or death. And if your boat failed out there, the ocean would not leave a body, a grave, or even a reason. It would simply take you. Most people imagine ancient human survival as something that happened on land, in caves, forests, or frozen plains. But some of the darkest survival decisions our ancestors ever made happened at the shoreline. Because the ocean offered something no other environment could. It offered escape, food, and new land. But only if you were willing to trust your life to water that could erase entire families in a single storm. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The first humans who pushed into the sea were not brave in the modern, heroic sense. They were desperate, observant, and willing to gamble everything. To survive the ocean, ancient humans had to do things that sound less like exploration and more like a long negotiation with drowning. Let's set the scene first, because most people underestimate how hostile the ancient sea really was. Today, if you go near the ocean, you usually do it with harbors, boats, maps, radios, rescue teams, and forecasts. Ancient people had none of that. They had coastlines that changed with the tides, storms that arrived without warning, currents they could not see, and boats made from materials that rotted away thousands of years ago. In fact, one reason prehistoric seafaring still seems mysterious is that boats and many coastal camps simply did not preserve well, and many of the shorelines ancient people used are now underwater. Which brings us to the first dark survival strategy. Leaving shore without knowing if you would ever see land again. Evidence suggests that prehistoric people crossed serious sea barriers far earlier than many assume, including crossings of at least about 60 kilometers during the last glacial period on the way to Sahul. That means ancient humans were not just hugging the beach. At some point, they were paddling into open water, where the horizon told them nothing, and turning back was not always an option. Think about what that really means. You step into a raft, canoe, or simple watercraft built with Stone Age tools. Beneath you are waves strong enough to roll the vessel, currents strong enough to carry you away, and distances long enough to outlast your strength. A recent experimental voyage using a primitive-style canoe crossed about 225 kilometers of open sea and took more than 45 hours while battling the Kuroshio current. Researchers openly said that ancient voyagers risked being drifted away and never returning home. Every boat was a wager against the horizon, and even if you survived the crossing, the shoreline itself could be deadly. We often imagine coasts as generous places full of shellfish, fish, seabirds, and easy food, and they were. But they were also wet, cold, unstable, and violent. One slip on rock, one misjudged wave, one freezing night after soaking clothes, and food-rich shorelines could become execution grounds. The same surf that brought in fish could smash a body against stone. The same tidal flats that fed you could trap you far from shelter. To survive there, ancient humans had to become intimate with death in another way. They stripped the sea and its animals for whatever could keep them alive. Shell became tools. Bone became points and implements. Large clamshells were shaped into adzes in island regions, helping create the tools needed for life near and on the water. Archaeological finds from island Southeast Asia show repeated maritime adaptation, not one lucky accident. People kept crossing, kept building, and kept turning animal remains into the next layer of survival. In other words, the sea fed you only if you were willing to carve survival out of whatever died in it. Now here's where it gets darker. The ocean does not preserve failure the way land does. On land, a disaster may leave bones, shelters, tools, or ash. At sea, a failed journey can leave nothing. No wreck, no grave, no proof, just absence. Entire attempts at migration may have vanished that way, swallowed without a trace. And because so many prehistoric coastlines were later drowned by rising seas, some of the best evidence for ancient maritime life now lies underwater, hidden beneath sediment, currents, and time. That matters because it changes how we picture survival. Ancient ocean life was not one glorious moment of discovery. It was repetition. Launching again after someone never came back, rebuilding after storms, teaching the next group which current to avoid, which season to trust, which stretch of water could kill them before sunrise. And that may have been the harshest truth of all. Surviving the ocean was never just about strength. It was about memory. Archaeologists have found evidence from submerged sites of fishing structures, worked wood, and coastal activity that shows some ancient communities were not occasional visitors to the sea. They lived with it. They built around it. They depended on it. But dependence is another word for vulnerability. If the fish failed, if the weather turned, if the crossing went wrong, hunger came quickly. So how did ancient humans survive an environment that could drown them, freeze them, starve them, or erase them completely? The answer was not courage alone. It was shared knowledge passed between people who had learned, often the hard way, how to read waves, seasons, coastlines, winds, and animal behavior. One person might be brave enough to launch into dark water, but bravery without inherited knowledge is just another way to disappear. When you put it all together, the picture that emerges is not really one of romance or adventure. It is one of brutal persistence. Ancient humans trusted fragile boats, harvested dangerous shorelines, shaped the remains of sea life into tools, and kept moving into waters that gave them no guarantee of return. They did not conquer the ocean. They survived it, barely, repeatedly, and at terrible risk. Tonight, if you stand near the sea and hear the waves, remember something. For our ancestors, that sound was never just peaceful. It was a promise and a threat at the same time. Food, distance, escape, storm, cold, and death, all moving in the same direction. The reason humans spread across islands and coastlines was not because the ocean became kind. It was because generation after generation, people were willing to face a world that could swallow them whole and go anyway.